Welcome to our deep dive. We're cracking open Apple's 2024 Form 10K annual report, the one they just dropped. We'll break down the big stuff, how their finances look this past year, and get a peek at what they're cooking up for the future.
Always interesting to dig into these things, right? You get a look behind the curtain, see how one of the biggest companies on the planet is thinking about their next move.
Yeah, exactly. And there were a couple things that jumped out at me right away. First, Apple's got this quirky way of doing their fiscal calendar, huh? Their year wraps up on the last Saturday of September, which means it could be a 52-week year or sometimes a 53-week year. Why do they do that?
Well, think about their product launches, especially the holiday season. That's huge for their sales, right? So by finishing their fiscal year in September, they can capture the full impact of those holiday sales numbers in their annual report. Makes it a cleaner picture.
Makes sense, yeah. It seems like every little detail is calculated with Apple. Another thing that caught my eye, they're making moves in artificial intelligence. They've got this new system they're calling Apple Intelligence. Is this their play to take on ChatGPT?
It's a big development, that's for sure. The report doesn't go too deep into the nuts and bolts of Apple Intelligence yet, but it shows they're serious about AI. They see it as a big growth area for them. It'll be interesting to see how they carve out their own space in a market that's already pretty crowded.
Yeah, definitely something to keep an eye on. Okay, so before we go any further, let's just lay the groundwork here. Can you give us the rundown on Apple's main business?
Sure thing. Apple basically operates in two big buckets, products and services. On the product side, you've got the usual suspects, the iPhone, Mac computers, iPad, and then all the stuff that's been growing like crazy. The wearables, their home devices, and accessories.
And their services seem to be really taking off lately, haven't they?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Services is a wide net, They've got their advertising business, Apple Care, cloud services, all the digital content like Apple Music and Apple TV plus Farday, and then their payment services. It's a lot.
It's pretty impressive how they've managed to weave all those products and services together. It seems like every time they launch a new gadget, it doesn't just boost their hardware sales, it pumps up their services revenue too.
You got it. It's a smart strategy. Take a new iPhone release, for example. It often leads to a spike in Apple Care subscriptions and App Store purchases. They've created this ecosystem where their products and services all feed into each other. It's a loop.
Yeah, pretty slick. Okay, so let's talk money. What's the big picture when it comes to their financial performance this year?
Well, Apple's total net sales for fiscal year 2024 were $394.33 billion. That's up 5% from 2023. Both products and services contributed to that growth, but here's the thing. Services revenue grew way faster, something like 16% year over year.
So even though the iPhone is still their cash cow, those services are becoming a bigger and bigger piece of the pie, huh?
That's exactly the takeaway. They're shifting, moving towards more of a service-centric model, which makes sense, right? Services are more stable, more recurring revenue.
Definitely makes sense. But they're not operating in a vacuum, are they? I mean, how did the global economic situation affect them this year?
Well, yeah, all those macroeconomic factors, inflation, strong U.S. dollar, they definitely threw some curveballs at Apple. It put pressure on their profitability, made it pricier for people in some parts of the world to buy their stuff.
So even a giant like Apple can't escape those global economic forces, huh? And what about their profitability? Did those economic headwinds squeeze their margins?
Their gross margin for 2024 was 46.2%, a little bit better than the 44.1% they saw in 2023, which means they're managing costs pretty well, holding on to their premium pricing. But it's still down from their peak of 47.4% back in 2022.
So kind of a mixed bag on the margins, huh? They're doing all right, but there's always room for improvement.
Exactly. And it's a complex equation, right? Lots of things feed into that gross margin. Cost of components, competition, exchange rates. It's a balancing act.
A lot to juggle, for sure. So let's talk about those challenges, those risks that Apple's facing. The report paints a pretty dynamic landscape, wouldn't you say?
Oh, yeah, definitely. There are a bunch of risk factors laid out in there that could trip them up. One big one is their reliance on a pretty concentrated supply chain. A lot of their key suppliers are clustered in Asia.
So any kind of disruption there, whether it's geopolitical stuff, natural disasters, another pandemic, who knows, it could have a major domino effect on their production and their profits, right?
Exactly. They're aware of this vulnerability. You can see it in the report. They talk about their efforts to diversify their supply chain, build in more resilience. But it's tough, It's a complex problem.
Yeah, I bet. It just goes to show, even a company as powerful as Apple is at the mercy of things they can't control sometimes. What about the competition? Are they feeling the heat from other tech giants?
The tech industry is a pressure cooker. They've got pressure from the big players, the established companies, but also from startups, the up-and-comers. They got to keep innovating, keep finding ways to stand out from the crowd if they want to stay on top.
I imagine their reliance on third-party developers for their software ecosystem adds another layer of complexity, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Changes to App Store policies, all the stuff around the Epic Games lawsuit and those EU regulations, that could have a big impact on their bottom line. It's a tightrope walk for them, trying to maintain control over their platform while keeping developers and regulators happy.
Sounds like a constant juggling act. So, given all these challenges, where does Apple go from here? What's their vision for the future?
Well, the report gives us a few clues about their strategic priorities. It's pretty clear. They're doubling down on research and development, they're exploring new product categories, and they're expanding their services offerings. They're not slowing down.
So they're not resting on their laurels. They're actively looking for new avenues to grow.
Exactly. And one area they're really focused on is artificial intelligence. They're betting big on it. The development of Apple Intelligence is a signal that they see AI as a key driver of innovation in the future.
It's kind of mind-blowing to think about how AI could shape their products and services in the years to come. Will we see iPhones that are even smarter, Apple Music recommendations that are hyper-personalized, maybe even completely new applications we haven't even thought of yet?
All of that's on the table. And you got to remember, Apple's got a knack for taking new technologies and weaving them into their products in a way that just feels natural, you know? It enhances the user experience. So it wouldn't be surprising to see AI woven into the fabric of their entire ecosystem.
Yeah, it's exciting to think about. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive. We've looked at Apple's core business, how their finances are doing, the challenges they're up against, and what they're aiming for in the future. It's a fascinating snapshot of a company at a crossroads.
Yeah, they're navigating a complex landscape, that's for sure. Things are changing fast. But they're also embracing the opportunities out there. They're committed to innovating. And we'll continue to unpack this story in the next part of our deep dive. We'll take a closer look at their financial figures, really break down the trends that are shaping their business. We'll get into the nitty-gritty of their revenue streams, their profitability, their cash flow. We'll see what those numbers tell us about where they stand now and where they're headed.
So stay tuned for Apple's deep dive into Apple's 2024 Form 10-K. We'll be back soon to continue the conversation.
All right, so welcome back to our deep dive into Apple's 2024 Form 10-K. In this part, we're going to put on our detective hats and zoom in on some of the specific risks and challenges they're facing. The ones highlighted in the report, you know.
Yeah, it's important to understand these potential stumbling blocks, right? So we're thinking about where Apple's headed. Every company has risks. That's just the nature of the beast.
Yeah.
But how they deal with those risks, how they try to soften the blow, that's often what separates the winners from the losers. Makes sense. Okay, let's start with those geopolitical tensions we talked about earlier. It feels like the world's getting a little more unpredictable these days, doesn't it?
Yeah.
How could that volatility impact a global company like Apple?
Well, any company that's got operations all over the globe, a supply chain that's stretched across continents, they're exposed to these geopolitical risks. Political instability, trade wars, even actual armed conflict. Those things can really disrupt the flow, throw a wrench in the works, especially for a company like Apple that's got such a finely tuned operation.
Yeah, those international trade restrictions can be a real headache, too. Tariffs, import-export controls, all that stuff can really mess things up.
Absolutely. Apple's business is built on international trade. They source components from all over the world, and then they sell their products everywhere, right? So any disruption to those trade flows, it can impact their costs, their ability to meet demand, and ultimately their bottom line.
It really highlights how interconnected the global economy is, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got the constant threat of cybersecurity breaches. Those can be crippling for any company, especially one that handles so much sensitive user data.
Oh, yeah. Cybersecurity is non-negotiable for a company like Apple. They're a prime target. Data breaches can be a nightmare, damage their reputation, erode customer trust, not to mention all the legal battles and costs associated with it. They're very aware of this risk. You see it in their report. They talk about all the things they're doing to beef up their cybersecurity.
So they're investing heavily in cybersecurity measures, trying to stay a step ahead of the hackers.
Yeah, it's a constant arms race, right? They've got dedicated teams, sophisticated protocols, and they bring in outside experts to assess their systems, find vulnerabilities, and help them strengthen their defenses. But it's a moving target, The bad guys are always coming up with new tricks, so they can't let their guard down for a second.
It's like a never-ending game of cat and mouse, huh? Okay, so the report also points out some potential vulnerabilities within Apple's own business model, right? Not just external threats.
Right, and one of the big ones is their reliance on a relatively small number of suppliers for those critical components. It's efficient, but it also makes them vulnerable.
Yeah, if one of those suppliers stumbles, it could have a ripple effect throughout their entire production process.
Exactly. And remember, a lot of these suppliers are concentrated in specific geographic regions, so any kind of localized disruption, a natural disaster, political unrest, something like that, could really throw a wrench in the works.
It's a trade-off, isn't it? Optimizing for efficiency versus building in more resilience. And then, of course, there's the intense competition they face from other tech giants.
Oh, yeah. The tech world is a battleground, man. Everybody's trying to eat everybody else's lunch. Apple knows this. They talk about it in the report. They emphasize the importance of constant innovation, finding ways to differentiate themselves, stay ahead of the curve. If they stop innovating, even for a minute, they'll get left behind.
It's like an arms race, constantly pushing the boundaries of technology and design. And sometimes that innovation leads to legal challenges, right? Like we're seeing with the Epic Games case.
Yeah, that lawsuit is a perfect example of how innovation can get tangled up in legal and regulatory complexities. The whole fight is about Apple's control over the App Store, the fees they charge developers.
And the European Commission's got their eye on Apple's App Store practices too, don't they?
Yep, the EC's been cracking down on what they see as anti-competitive behavior by these big tech companies. They've hit Apple with some hefty fines in the past, and they've got ongoing investigations that could lead to even more penalties or even force them to make changes to their App Store business model. It's a big deal.
It's a reminder that even a company as powerful as Apple isn't above the law, right? They have to play by the rules, and those rules are always changing.
Yeah, navigating that legal and regulatory landscape is a crucial part of their success. They have to stay on top of the current regulations, of course, but they also have to anticipate what's coming down the pipeline. It's a constant dance.
Okay, so we've talked about external pressures, but what about internal challenges? What are some of the potential risks that stem from factors within Apple itself?
Well, one of the biggest internal challenges for any tech company these days is attracting and retaining top talent. Silicon Valley's a hotbed, right? Everybody's fighting over the best engineers, designers, executives.
It's like a bidding war for the brightest minds.
It's not just about offering big salaries and perks, though. You got to create a company culture that people want to be a part of. A culture that fosters innovation, collaboration, a sense of purpose. People want to feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves.
Because if they can't attract and keep those top people, their ability to innovate and compete will suffer, right?
Exactly. Apple gets this. They talk about it in their report. They emphasize their commitment to building a positive work environment, investing in employee development, creating opportunities for growth.
And they highlight the importance of diversity and inclusion, which is crucial for attracting a wider pool of talent and fostering innovation, right?
It's not just about checking boxes. It's about creating a workplace where everyone feels valued, respected, empowered to contribute their best work. At the end of the day, a company's success comes down to its people, their talent, and their dedication.
Couldn't agree more. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, a lot of potential risks, both external and internal. It paints a pretty complex picture for Apple's future.
Yeah, no doubt. But risk is part of the game, especially in the tech world, which is constantly changing. The good news is Apple's got a track record. They've been through tough times before, and they've always come out swinging. They know how to adapt.
So now that we've examined the risks, let's turn our attention to the future. Where's Apple headed? What's their roadmap for growth? What are they betting on?
That's what we'll explore in Part 3. We'll dig into their strategic priorities, their investments in new technologies, and their plans for expanding their product and service offerings. So stick around. We'll be right back.
And we're back for the final part of our deep dive into Apple's 2024 Form 10K annual report. We've talked about their business, their money, the challenges they're up against. Now it's time to look ahead, right? What's next for Apple? What's their game plan for growth?
Well, the report gives us some pretty good clues about where their heads are at. The big takeaway for me is their commitment to innovation. You can see it in their R&D spending. They're putting serious money behind it.
Makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Apple's always been about pushing the envelope, tech-wise. But where are they focusing those R&D efforts? What are they betting on specifically?
Artificial intelligence is a huge focus for them. We've talked about Apple Intelligence, their own AI system, and while the report doesn't spill all the beans, it's obvious they want to be a major player in the AI space.
It's exciting to think about the possibilities, isn't it? I mean, will we see AI features baked into their existing products like the iPhone or Apple Watch? Or could they even come out with completely new product categories built around AI?
It's all on the table. And Apple's really good at taking new technologies and making them feel seamless, integrated into their products in a way that just makes sense for the user. So I wouldn't be surprised to see AI woven into the fabric of their entire ecosystem.
Makes you wonder what they're cooking up in Cupertino. Beyond AI, what other areas are they exploring?
Augmented reality is another one they're pouring resources into. AR. Those rumors about Apple glasses just won't die, and if they actually release something like that, it could be a game changer. Think about it. The way we interact with information, with the world around us, it could be totally different.
Yeah, it sounds like science fiction almost. Walking down the street and having info about nearby places just pop up in front of you, or having virtual meetings where your colleagues are like holograms in your living room. Pretty wild.
Exactly. And Apple wants to be at the forefront of that. They're not afraid to take risks.
Okay, so they're investing in cutting-edge tech, but they're also doubling down on their services business, which is already a big money maker for them. What's their strategy there?
Well, they're expanding the services they offer, adding things like Apple Fitness Plus and Apple News Plus, Live, and they're constantly making their existing services better, like Apple Music and Apple TV Plus Live. They're giving people more reasons to stay within that Apple ecosystem.
Yeah, it's like they're building this walled garden, right? A place where you can do everything you need to do, seamlessly switch between all your Apple devices and services. Hard to leave once you're in.
That's the idea. And it's a smart strategy, right? They're leveraging that hardware-software synergy to create an experience that's hard to beat.
It's a powerful combination, for sure. And it makes you realize Apple's not just a tech company anymore, are they? They're like a lifestyle brand woven into every aspect of their customers' digital lives.
Exactly. Think about it. They're in entertainment, communication, fitness, news, even financial services with Apple Pay and Apple Card.
Wow. They really are everywhere, aren't they? Okay, so with all this talk about AI, AR, and services, are they branching out into any completely new product categories? Anything totally unexpected?
Well, there's that persistent rumor about the Apple Car, right? An electric car designed and built by Apple. Now, that would be a major shakeup in the auto industry.
An Apple Car. I can't even imagine what that would look like. Would it be seamlessly integrated with all their other devices? Would it have some crazy new features we haven't even thought of yet?
Who knows? The car industry is a tough nut to crack, lots of complexity, tons of capital required. But if any company has the resources and the guts to do it, it's Apple.
Yeah, I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Even if they don't end up actually making a car, the fact that they're even considering it says a lot about their willingness to push boundaries, right? Always thinking big.
Definitely. It's that constant drive to innovate that's made them so successful.
Well, as we wrap up this deep dive, it's pretty clear that Apple's not slowing down. Sure, they've got challenges ahead of them, but they're also embracing the future, investing in technologies that could change the world.
This deep dive into their 2024 Form 10K has given us a glimpse into their strategy, their financial performance, and their vision for what's next. And it's exciting stuff.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us on this journey. We hope you found it insightful. Until next time, keep those brains buzzing, stay curious, and remember, in the tech world, the only thing that's constant is change.